And thank you for joining today's event, the New National Guard. As those who have joined us before know, my name is Erez Bleicher, and I'm the Communications and Membership Director of the Green Olive Collective, a binational advocacy center and tour guiding cooperative committed to a democratic future and an end to the ongoing displacement of Palestinians. We provide communities around the world with insights into the apartheid policies of the occupation and the resources to engage in meaningful advocacy in solidarity with Palestinians. Your contributions today will go to sustain our work, amplifying the voices of human rights defenders and communities living under military rule, to combat the repressive policies of the government and to raise local and transnational awareness about the violence of occupation. We need contributions from you, our wider community, in order to cover the costs of the event and sustain future publicly accessible initiatives in support of human rights. You can donate at greenolivetours.com/contributions, which I've just put into the chat, and we will donate 10% of all contributions today to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, which provides health care for children in Gaza and is developing a pediatric cardiac surgery program in Khan Yunis, which is truly necessary and critical work for communities that deserve their rights. Yahav Zohar, who you heard me chatting with just a moment ago, is a senior guide and partner with the Green Olive Collective and a very sharp interpreter of political events. He has guided tours in Jerusalem for over a decade, perhaps guiding several of you in attendance here today through the city of Jerusalem and in the region over the past years, while shedding light on the policies of displacement, surveillance, and policing that continue to have devastating consequence for Palestinian communities living under occupation. I've experienced Yahav as an incredible analyst. I have, of course, taken just a tour or two with him over the years and learned tremendously, and have the pleasure of being a peer and partner in the Green Olive Collective. And in my experience, he has an uncanny ability to put into focus the ways that history, religion, power, and state violence intersect in ongoing real-time developments. Today, of course, he is going to be speaking with us about the announcement of the quote-unquote new National Guard that Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu agreed to form under the direct authority of extremist Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir. This shrewd agreement was made, as many of you know, in exchange for postponing the proposals for judicial overhaul and managed to significantly demobilize the mass demonstrations against the government that have taken place in the last months. Yahav will be speaking with us about the agreement and situate it within a broader history of policy, policing, and security administration in Israel. So thanks, Yahav. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we appreciate all that you bring to bear. The last thing I'll say before passing over to you is, I guess, a few last things. Firstly, I'm a bit hoarse and have a tickle in my throat today, so please pardon me in advance if I cough during the presentation at any time. And then finally, we'll very much open the conversation after Yahav talks with us and shares some words to questions and answer, conversation, and we want to hear all of your voices as well. But from this moment on, please feel free to jump into the chat and type in your questions. And while Yahav speaks, I'll be collecting them. So you can just at the beginning of the comment in the chat, write question with a colon or a dash. Then I'll be perusing them, looking through as we're hearing from Yahav, and then I'll integrate them into the question and answer period at the end. So with that, I'll pass to you, Yahav. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Erez. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you so much for everybody who's turned on their cameras, making me feel a little less alone here. I don't know, I think some of you have taken tours with me. I see some people, but most I don't recognize. Usually when I'm guiding a tour, I have things to point at so that I'm talking, but you're looking not at me, which is easier for me. Or when I'm giving a presentation sitting down, I have maps to show. Today, there's not a lot to show you in the new National Guard, as it does not yet exist. And yet, I have put together some images, mostly just to distract you from looking at me, or for me to feel less looked at. So, a presentation. Let's see. Does this work? Can you see this? Great.
Yes, we can.
Good. I never know, and I'm glad it works. I've been asked, I have to say, I think this came from Ellis. I don't know who it came from, but the subject matter was Israel's new National Guard, which was much in the news when we decided to have this event. And so I went looking for what is Israel's new National Guard, and also what images can I show you pertaining to Israel's new National Guard. And so two questions jumped at me immediately. One, what is a National Guard? And two, no less importantly, what is Israel? And so I'll start with the second. I'll get to the first, because Google Map of Israel, I hope you will, like myself, be confused. It's very hard to get a straight answer from the state of Israel about where is the state of Israel, or what are the borders of the state of Israel. So this slide I'm showing you now, there's two images. One of them is the map that we use at Green Olive Tours often, which is showing Israel in one color and what we're calling the occupied territories in another color. But that is not, in fact, what Israel holds to be officially Israel. So I went on the website of the Israeli Ministry of Education, who put the maps up in my school when I was a kid and taught me what was Israel. And I asked them, where is Israel? Show me Israel. And I found that they have many variants of a map of Israel. Most of them look something like this, the picture on the other side of this slide, which is, first of all,
people are commenting they don't see a slide.
But you see a slide?
I see a presentation open and a blank slide, but not the slide open also. I think we're seeing your computer screen, but somehow not the presentation itself. Not sure.
Okay. That's
maybe you could stop sharing and reshare. We can see.
Let's try again.
Thanks to everyone who chimed in. Now it's there. Other people give thumbs up if you can see. Beautiful. Good to go.
Well, almost. Okay. All right. Good. This somehow, I never get good at this. I did this over COVID, and then I sort of got good at this. And then once I could stop, I stopped, and now. All right. But now you can see it. So two maps of Israel on the screen, right? Yeah?
Yes.
One of them, the one I usually use in my presentations, is showing the state of Israel and the occupied territories as they are generally internationally recognized. The other provided by the Israeli government Ministry of Education, which is, first of all, completely out of proportion. It is not geographically accurate in any way. But secondly, it shows the Golan Heights as Israel, most of the West Bank as Israel. And within the West Bank, I don't know, I hope you guys can see this, there is some small brown patches which are unidentified, which some of you who have been here may know is areas A and B of the Palestinian autonomy, but they're not marked as such. So I said, this can't be the best map of Israel that the Israeli government can give me. So I went on Googling and I found most of the maps either just identify Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel as Israel, or parts of the West Bank as Israel and parts not. It's only actually the map, which is, now I don't know what side, it's on my right over here, which is a map which is not produced by the Israeli government. The Israeli government does not, and I think this is a point worth noting, the Israeli government does not produce a map showing what it officially considers to be Israel. This map, as far as I can tell, was made by some very industrious Wikipedia editors struggling with this problem. And it's not titled actually in the original Israel, it's titled Areas Where Israeli Law is Applied, Whether by International Agreement or by Israeli Unilateral Decision. More or less, that's the title. Because it's almost like the first map I showed you, except East Jerusalem. Over here, Israel has annexed, so Israel says that's officially Israel. The rest of the world says it's not. Most of the West Bank, Israel says, is not officially Israel, and yet, on most maps, shows it as Israel. All right, that was a confusing beginning. And this is because the next thing that I wondered is what is a National Guard? And it turns out that this is even more poorly defined than where or what is Israel. If you try this, look for a dictionary definition of National Guard or any definition of National Guard, you will find that there basically is none. Most of the definitions say the US National Guard is such and such. But not a National Guard. The closest thing I could find to a definition is a semi-military body whose role it is to provide sorry. I have to move this. Provide a response to internal events that threaten the safety of people and property. Now, that's sort of what I thought in the first place, which is why I wanted the map, because my question then is, what is internal? Right? The National Guard, unlike the military, is meant to act internally, but where is inside Israel and where is outside Israel? Is the West Bank in Israel? Is it not in Israel? And then I found what they said in the forming of this National Guard, of this specific new Israeli National Guard. And that says that the National Guard was formed in the fight against nationalist crime, terrorism. This is translated from the Hebrew because there was no English statement. Nationalist crime, terrorism, as well as for the strengthening of governance in areas where this is required. Now, I don't think that many countries have a nationalist crime or even know what nationalist crime is. We do know, I think, what is terrorism. And terrorism is a funny word because it's defined by whodunit, right? If a gunman shoots up a school, it's terrorism. Generally, if that person is of a certain ethnicity or religion, right? It's a code word that is used for certain kinds of people committing acts and not for the acts themselves, as is nationalist crime, as well as the strengthening of governance in areas where this is required. All of these in Israel are a pretty clear statement, which is we're setting up this National Guard to deal with Palestinians, or the Israeli government and the people doing it would more likely say with Arabs, right? So it's internal internally to deal with the Arabs inside. Okay, jumping. I'll get back to that. I wanted you to see this lovely, lovely individual. This is a person who would be within the purview of most National Guards, I guess. A person who has been more than once convicted of rioting, obstructing a police officer, inciting racism, possessing propaganda for a terrorist organization, and supporting terrorist organization. So if, let's say, if our National Guard was in fact meant to deal just generally with riots and terrorists or terrorist supporters, this might be the person to be targeted by such a National Guard. And just because he's such an attractive individual, I decided to just show you some more pictures of him, as they might cheer you up at Fort Lauderdale Airport or wherever it is you are. So this is the same gentleman. His name is Itamar Ben-Gvir, protesting Tel Aviv gay pride. And the English words that I put on top, ugly, disgusting, are not meant to describe Mr. Ben-Gvir, but to translate the sign that he is holding in Hebrew. Although they might serve both purposes. Here he is at another Pride event, also in Tel Aviv, kicking a participant. And I couldn't resist this next photo. I think I should just keep it up for the rest of the talk, of him being kicked back by that same individual. This is Tel Aviv Pride 2008, when this person was still, Mr. Ben-Gvir was going in and out of arrest, getting in trouble with the law. And, well, protesting Pride events and many other things. Oh, jump to the same Mr. Ben-Gvir with a policeman next to him. That is not just a policeman, that is the chief of police for the state of Israel. And in this picture, Mr. Ben-Gvir is already the direct superior of that person, being our Minister of National Security. So that's actually a new term that he came up with. The previous ministers in this role, in charge of the police, they were, in Hebrew, they were Hasar leBitachon Pnim, the Minister for Internal Security, which was translated to English generally as a Minister for Public Security. But Mr. Ben-Gvir, in the recent parliamentary coalition negotiations, which formed this new government, insisted that he would not be the Minister of Internal Security, he would be the Minister of National Security, which he now is, in charge of the police. These fine young men that you don't really see here, they're a little bit hiding, are the Israeli border police. Now, the Israeli border police is basically, as I understand it, already doing all those things, which the National Guard would do. So the border police, if anybody has been on a tour or just been in the old city of Jerusalem, you must have seen the border police. Here they are, walking by the Lion's Gate, by the Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And they are very close to what I would imagine. I mean, they are a National Guard in that they are a very heavily militarized police. or a policing military. They are the people who get sent to break up often protests like this. And they already meet basically the insinuated requirements of the new National Guards, because what they do, like if you walk in the old city of Jerusalem, if I walk in the old city of Jerusalem, if Erez walks in the old city of Jerusalem, we will never get stopped by the border police. The border police are standing there. I don't know what I would do, but I would not get their attention. They are there to arrest and search Palestinians. That is exclusively, almost exclusive, we have to say, maybe, one of our guides, who is not a Palestinian, was recently arrested by the border police. But that was for trying to interfere with them arresting, I think, 13-year-old boy, a Palestinian, on the streets of the old city. And that was really an outlier. We don't get that a lot.
Actually, I was stopped very briefly the other day for wearing a Justice for Iyad al-Halak shirt, which I was very surprised at. But to Yahav's point, it was a huge rarity and it never happened before. And they're always positioned there profiling and detaining Palestinians, checking IDs.
Right. So, yeah, there are outliers, but there, Iyad al-Halak that Erez mentioned is a young man who was killed by the border police, actually just outside this shot, but right by the Lion's Gate of the old city of Jerusalem. He was Palestinian. He was also special needs, completely unarmed, completely non-violent person who was killed inside a dumpster room by the border police, which is very much the rule, that who gets arrested, who gets killed by the border police is Palestinians. So what is different about the new National Guard from the border police and why do we need it? This is just some more. The border police is supervising also in East Jerusalem, the demolition of a home. This is the border police in Hebron, carrying off 3 teen boys. This is already getting a little bit closer to what I wanted to say. This is the border police in Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem in May of 2021. And it is the events of May of 2021 that, in fact, brought about the decision to form a new National Guard. What happened, some of you may recall, in Sheikh Jarrah in May of 2021, there were pending evictions, which became the focus of national tensions and brought opportunistic politicians, particularly pictured here, Mr. Ben-Gvir, at the time, a parliament member, coming to set up his office in the street in front of the Palestinian houses meant to be evicted, trying to stir up trouble, trying to get tensions rising. At the same time, there was conflagration around the Aqsa Mosque, and then an Israeli bombing campaign of the Gaza Strip and missiles from Gaza shot at Israel. And this is really the point of it all. Palestinian citizens of Israel within 1948 Israel protesting and or rioting at the same time as the rockets from Gaza and the bombing of Gaza. And this is when the border police didn't know where to be. Should they be in East Jerusalem, in Sheikh Jarrah and Al-Aqsa, or should they be in Jaffa and in Haifa, and all those places where Palestinians were protesting inside Israel? And so some of them were called. This is them in the city of Lod, inside 1948 Israel, coming to bring their brand of policing into Israeli cities. And this led this guy Omer Bar-Lev, who soon after that became the Minister of Public Security, to decide that basically we need more border police, and we need border police inside 1948 Israel to act to Palestinians, citizens of Israel, when they begin to protest, to put them down the same way that they would in East Jerusalem or the West Bank. Omer Bar-Lev is, it's strange to say this, but he's more or less the far left of the Israeli parliament. He was a member of the Labour Party and left-wing within the Labour Party. And here he is with Prime Minister Bennett, in fact, announcing the formation of an Israeli National Guard more than a year ago, before Mr. Ben-Gvir became minister. This sort of fell into the hands of Mr. Ben-Gvir when he became the new Minister of National Security. When the new far-right government came into power, it fell into his hands and he said, yeah, let's do this. I want a special police force to enforce. He didn't say these words, but he paraphrased the words these words, in the fight against nationalist crime and terrorism, basically to police Palestinians inside Israel. I want to be in command of it. And that's not going to happen. I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen. What the government did, they set up a special committee to investigate it, to postpone it. And apparently behind the scenes, Mr. Ben-Gvir already agreed that he doesn't need to be directly in charge of the new National Guard. He's just going to appoint the new chief of police, who is going to be in charge of the new National Guard. So basically, what's happening is that Israel doesn't have clear borders. And it has different systems of laws for different people. And the border police is one expression of that. And the National Guard is a further expression of the same thing, of that sort of logic of the West Bank, of the settlements taking over all of Israel. And Mr. Ben-Gvir has become its new commander. He's also really the person who is one of the people who helped make it happen by provoking those riots. So those riots or protests in May of 2021, they were called by Palestinians sometimes the Unity Intifada. So where Palestinians inside Israel and in the West Bank and in Gaza rose up together. And for people like Ben-Gvir, that was a moment to say, basically, Palestinians are all the same. They're all enemies of our state. They all need to be repressed, oppressed, controlled in the same way. And that was happening anyway. That is the process that Israel is going through anyway, is a process of blurring its borders, of creating a system of government that is for Jews and a system of government that is for Palestinians. It is what Mr. Ben-Gvir explicitly stands for, but actually the decision to do it, was not made by Mr. Ben-Gvir. It just fell into his hands. It was made by the Labour Party. It was made by the previous government. It's in fact a very narrow difference between this guy here, who's like modeling everything that's supposed to be nice about Israel, and his replacement, this guy. Though the scary thing that they told us 2-3 weeks ago when we started, which is Ben-Gvir is going to command his own private militia, that's not exactly going to happen. But what is going to happen is we're going to have more and more border police and border police-like force in Jaffa, in Haifa, in Lod or Lid, everywhere in Israel. This is a process that would be happening with or without Mr. Ben-Gvir, which he's helping to expedite, is really blurring the lines and borders of what is Israel and what is military government, what it means. All right, I think maybe I'll stop there for now. I think I've probably talked enough for now. And I haven't been able to look in the chat while I've been talking, but Erez, maybe we should break this up. Have there been some interesting questions you'd like to throw into the mix?
Sure. Well, firstly, thanks to everyone. Firstly, thanks to Yahav for giving that overview and discussing the ways that the current moment is situated in a broader set of issues and in the ways that military dictatorship is continuing to extend itself and tactics from the West Bank are continuing to pervade into the sovereign territory of Israel, according to international law. I guess a few things. First of all, because we're a relatively smaller group today, I think I'll allow people to unmute themselves. And Louis Friedberg, you asked a question about a timeline for the establishment of the Guard, which Yahav has already talked about some, but I guess from that, Louis, I'll turn it to you in just a moment to ask in your own words. I guess I wanted to add to that also, what do we see as the developments going forward in the next week? What are flashpoint moments in terms of the current sitting coalition and government? When is judicial overhaul going to be put back on the table? What are the dynamics in the next weeks where negotiations and conversations about these things are going to be back? But Louis, one moment, I'm going to let people unmute themselves, and then I want to hear you ask as well. Great. Louis, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, and sorry, maybe I missed this in the beginning because I just didn't catch the first few minutes, but is there a concrete timeline for this? I mean, what would be the next steps?
Right. No. The short answer is no. In fact, it seems like a lot is being done to put this off to a vague future. Netanyahu is very good at making promises and then making those promises disappear. So he made this promise of a National Guard to Ben-Gvir at a certain moment when he needed him. And then very soon it turned out that there were complications and they set up a special government committee, which within 60 days, which is there's a while yet, within 60 days is supposed to give a proposal for what that National Guard would actually be, because we don't know how many people in this National Guard, exactly where it would be, what it would do. Is it different from the National Guard that has already been set up to some extent? It's all very, very vague. If you try to get into any details, the answer is we don't have them.
Well, so could I just follow up and thank you for this presentation. How concerned should we be that this might actually happen, or how concerned are you that this would actually happen, or is this, a symbolic issue,
right?
Offering to the right.
So this already happened. We already have a National Guard. A National Guard was set up by our previous government. It numbers at the moment some 1,000 policemen, border policemen who are to be deployed within Israeli borders, within Israeli cities. Probably this will lead to some increase in that force, these promises to Ben-Gvir. But I think, I don't know, I feel great concern about the existence of the border police as it has been for decades. The fact that we have a specialized police force, which is heavily militarized, 2 police people without civil rights, using a lot of brute force, specifically ethnically targeted, that is a huge cause for concern to me. I think we should do whatever we can to try to change the structural racism of the Israeli state and its policing. I'm not sure that this is actually a very dramatic change in that. It's a sort of logical next step. It is happening already to some extent. Some more of it will happen. And what I think really is, as long as Israel is holding Palestinians under military government, as long as Israel defines itself as a state not belonging to all its citizens, but to the Jewish people, and sees the non-Jews within it as a disturbance, a problem, a danger, we're going to keep having policing like this, whether it's directly under Mr. Ben-Gvir or whether it's not, whether it's called the border police or it's called the National Guard. I think we should be very concerned about it. I am very concerned about it, but not about a specific timeline of this National Guard at this moment.
Right. So
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And so to echo that, while a specific National Guard under the direct authority of Ben-Gvir may not happen, the continuing expansion of policing, surveillance, and military rule is happening and continuing unabated, as Yahav has pointed out, and that should concern all of us, and all of us should be vigilant. I guess I want to, firstly, someone in the chat asked if we could stop the screen share now that we're chatting, and then, which might be
but
good.
But he's such a pretty guy.
Yeah, a shame. Sorry to deprive everyone of that personage. And I want to turn it over to Ellen Stone, if you want to ask your question about the different controls, which I think gets to some of the different distinctions that Yahav has spoken to, and can understandably be difficult to grasp and from an abstract position, and without seeing the differences on the ground, and also those differences, while those differences are also collapsing as we're speaking to. So Ellen, do you want to jump in? Are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, so my understanding from somewhere is that there's a difference in international law and expectations of police forces and military forces. And I seem to remember hearing that one of the, maybe it was the border police that control part of the boss, what's his name, Netanyahu's deal was to transfer control, I think, of maybe the border police from military to police. It would make a difference in what their responsibilities were and how accountable they would be.
So the border police is a part of the police officially. It's under the command of the chief of police, although it serves in the West Bank at the invitation of the military, and in fact also under some, it's actually quite confusing. It really is, and it's purposely confusing. It's not a mistake, just as the fact that Israel's borders are not clear are not a mistake. This is deliberate vagueness. Now we have to say, everything that's done, almost everything that's done by the Israeli military and the border police in the West Bank is most considered in contravention of international law.
Yeah, of course.
I don't believe that anybody in Israeli government is very seriously concerned about the niceties of international law. And nor, I have to say, perhaps sadly, am I. Because, well, let's not go into what I think about international law, but it's not very useful, for one thing. There's nobody to apply it or enforce it. Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know how the legality of it would change if it were defined as a police or a military. In both cases, it's making arrests of people outside Israel's borders, outside Israel's recognized borders, say, is a great problem in international law.
Just to illustrate what
Army people have, I want to say a more realistic, maybe a better sense that, wait a minute, this is where not to go than police do. So I'm thinking it might make a difference whether these units report to the police or to the army, but.
Well,
And Israel pays no attention to international law, so.
right, and I mean, a lot of the stuff that's happening in the West Bank, policing actions are performed by the military. The arrest of children is regularly done by the military. Raids into people's homes and searches, confiscations are all done by the military and the border police in the West Bank almost interchangeably. Really, these lines are very blurred. The border police, though, does them also in East Jerusalem, where the military won't go because under Israeli law, it is Israel, not military government. And also increasingly in Jaffa, in Lod, in the Bedouin communities of the Negev, in the areas where Palestinian citizens of Israel live, the border police is operating there too. So it's bringing military-like behavior or military government-like behavior into Israel proper.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and there's a lot to unpack there historically also. We don't have the time to go into it fully right now, but I think something that's very often left out of the conversation about Israel-Palestine and the history of occupation is that Palestinian citizens of Israel were under military rule within what international law considers the sovereign territory of the state from 1948 to 1966. Then military governance of Palestinian citizens of Israel ended in 1966, but a lot of the tactics and the security personnel from that system of law then transferred to the newly acquired territories in 1967 when the West Bank was conquered. So this history of back and forth in terms of the policing of Palestinians. Someone asked also about whether the National Guard will be governing Arab Israelis as well as Palestinians. This speaks to the confusion of those terms also. Those terms are contested and used differently within different political narratives. But in general, in whatever context, there's a general privileging of Jewish citizens and rights and a lack of respect for the freedom of movement and full rights, civil rights of Palestinians or Arab citizens, as they're called in different political narratives. And I'm looking at the different questions now, and I guess I wanted to turn it to a few other places that have come up in the slides. But I guess I wanted to ask Yahav, I thought it was really, I hadn't seen some of those photos from the Pride Parades. I'd seen some of them and not others. And it's interesting to think about the history of Ben Gvir, but also in a more larger sense with increasing policing and an increase in right-wing, well, it's hard to say, but this new extremist government currently in place and the trajectory it might create going forward. Do you see this increase in policing and the building of police forces as something that will come potentially to affect other marginalized communities along with Palestinians and Palestinian citizens? Or what do you think are the broader implications if the current trajectories or the worst versions of them do take place?
Okay, that's a cheerful question. So look, if we talk about the political crisis in Israel now, the current political crisis in Israel, it is largely about the government, Mr. Ben Gvir and friends, wanting to do away with the power of the Supreme Court to restrict the government's actions. And so why do they want to do that? Right? There must be something that they want to do that the Supreme Court won't allow them to do. One way to try to figure, and they won't tell us what it is, but they just say we hate the Supreme Court because it's stopping us from doing it what we need to do, but what is it that we need to do? They won't tell us. So we can look at things that the Supreme Court has stopped them from doing in the past. Why is it that they're upset with the Supreme Court? So most of them are to do with Palestinians. But not so much the Palestinians in the West Bank, right? One of the things that happens over and over and over, almost every one of these last, we've had like how many elections in how many years, is the parliament votes not to allow the Arab parties or some of the Arab parties to participate in the elections. They say these parties don't support the Israeli law that Israel should be Jewish and democratic, right? Particularly Balad, but also Hadash. They say these parties don't want Israel to be a Jewish state anymore, therefore they should be illegal and shouldn't be allowed to run. Every time the Knesset committee votes this, and the Supreme Court shoots it down and says, no, you have to allow them to run. So we can guess that one thing they want to do once they get rid of the Supreme Court curtailing their power is to block those parties from participating in elections, meaning basically to block the Palestinian citizens of Israel from participating in Israeli democracy, even in this formal way. Like those parties never get invited to join coalitions, but now they want them not to even be able to run, not to have a place in the Israeli parliament. Another thing is to do with the asylum seekers and undocumented workers which are here, which Israeli governments have several times decided that they should be locked up or that they should be deported to Rwanda. And these things have partially been blocked or curtailed by the Supreme Court. So that's, like, I would say those are two very immediate target populations. If these people get their way, they're going to restrict the political rights and actions of Palestinian citizens of Israel to make the parliament basically Jewish only, or as close to that as they can. And they're going to deport asylum seekers, guest workers who overstayed their visas. Basically, the main aim of their policies is at, right, they would say this, non-Jews. They want the state to be more Jewish, and that also means to get non-Jewish people out of here if possible, or out of the political process. And sure, when that happens, if they manage to do that in the worst case scenario, which I don't think they will soon, eventually they might, but not in the next few weeks or months. If they manage to get their way and get rid of any oversight by the Supreme Court and outlaw Palestinian citizens of Israel from participating in elections, then, or outlaw their parties from running, then right? They like to say that basically Palestinians want to kill us all and everything we're doing is defending ourselves. But in the real world, you can see a pretty clear differentiation between Palestinians who are under military government, who are fighting with paramilitary or violent actions, and Palestinians who are Israeli citizens who are trying to fight through the democratic system. If you take away their democratic rights, you can sort of expect that there's going to be more civil disobedience / violent protest / attacks from Palestinian citizens of Israel, and then a border police or border police-like force in their communities will be more needed. I think the direction that we're going in, direction that this government is going in, right? So somebody wrote a book once about Israel, which is called This Regime, Which Is Not One. Right, so we have a democracy or formal democracy in most of the country, and we have military government in other parts of the country. In most of the Palestinians are in the area under military government where they don't have political rights, but those Palestinians who are within Israel proper have Israeli citizenship and have political rights. Basically, this government or people like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, what they would like to do is to bring the logic of the West Bank to all of Israel. To make all of Israel more like the West Bank as a space where only Jews have political rights and where Palestinians are in a situation where they can be arrested without trial, where they can have people go into their homes where they are without political rights and largely without civil rights. They want a more, we already have to some degree a Jewish supremacist state, but they want it much more so. And that's the direction that they're working in. And what I find, has not been asked, but I'm going to answer it very briefly anyway. The danger that I see, the scary thing that I see, is that the people who are protesting this, the people who are protesting for democracy in the streets of Israel, largely are not including the Palestinians of the West Bank in that call. Right? They're basically saying, let's keep Israel within these borders formally democratic. And we're not talking about it, but basically, let's keep the military government in the West Bank and the settlements in the West Bank. And what I think is inevitable is if you keep that, you're going to keep creating people like Ben Gvir and Smotrich and empowering them. Fostering people who live in this space of complete Jewish supremacy and empowering them to then come and keep trying to bring that to the rest of Israel, that without a real fight, right, as the first question, when should we be concerned? A long time ago. Without a real fight to make all of this country democratic, inevitably we're going to be needing more and more militarized police forces, more and more secret police, and we're going to have a constant, what's the word? It's going to keep creeping in. The military government and its logic is going to keep infusing the rest of Israel as long as it exists and is fostered by Israeli governments.
Thanks, Yahav. And I think that's a key lesson that we're learning over and over again and needs to be impressed, of course, also on this point. I think we have time for one last question, and then maybe I'll pass it to you for any closing thoughts. I see that Judy Ullman, my apologies if I've mispronounced the name, asked, how do we reconcile our values with how to respond to threats? And there's a way, I'm very sorry, Judy, that we don't quite have the time for me to pass it over to ask in person, but I think there's a way in that that question gets to the heart of our conversation today, because it's a question of security and how we define security and how do we think and what is our political imagination and vision around a future in which everyone can thrive with full civil liberties and rights. So I'd love to hear any last thoughts you have about that, Yahav, and then any last thoughts in general about what you think are the political lessons coming out of the agreement that was made, whatever it turns out to become, or generally in this moment. And then I'll close it off.
Right. So Itamar Ben-Gvir was a fringe character. It was a guy, as you said, was convicted several times of membership of a terrorist organization, a rioter, but mostly a sort of curiosity for the Israeli news, a strange shouting person. And he's entered into the heart of Israeli politics, and that is a trend. Because I think I've said this already, I'm restating the same thing in a different way. How do we reconcile our values with security? Where Israel gives Palestinians a vote and political representation, we have much, much less violence. If we want to minimize violence, we need to give people a political recourse and a way to participate in the way their lives are being shaped, not through taking up arms. As long as we're holding people under military government or under a state that defines them systemically as second class, we're going to have some of that. So the real interest of security aligns perfectly with the values of promoting democracy. Where people have democratic participation, we have much less violence. Where people have civil rights, we have much less violence. It's not one against the other. And I don't know, it seems pretty straightforward. If you want to have more peace and security, you give people in their personal lives more peace and security, not a police that raids randomly into their home, not tear gas in their street, not random arrests of children, not you generate peace and security by being more peaceful and secure, and by allowing people more peace and security in their daily lives. I think, again, this problem is not going to be solved by, it's not going to be solved by these political negotiations happening right now in the president's residence in Jerusalem. It's only really going to be solved by a very deep overhaul of Israel's definition of itself. And one part of that, as I sort of hinted in my first slide, is for Israel to tell us where Israel begins and ends. Does Israel include the West Bank? Does Israel include East Jerusalem? And if they do, if it does, then all those people are Israelis. And none of them can be governed under military government. That is like the protesters who are shouting the street and screaming democracy. They have a very good point. If they could just extend it one step further to include everybody here. Democracy in the fundamental sense of a one person, one vote system would solve all of this. Whether in the form of one state with the one person, one vote system, of two states with a border between them, or a confederation, or I'm sure there's some fourth option I'm not thinking of now, but just giving civil rights to people is the route to security. Maintaining this kind of police force to police people under military government and is doing the opposite of that.
Thanks, Yahav, and thanks for taking the time to be with us and impress the point, as you have in so many different instances on this call, that we cannot have military dictatorship on the one hand and robust democracy on the other, that it cannot be, and that safety and the conditions for everyone to thrive can only take place when there is equality, democracy, and a joint stake in a common future. So with that, unfortunately, we have to close. Thanks again, Yahav, for your valuable perspective and sincerely for your time. And thanks to each of you on behalf of everyone at Green Olive for joining this timely event. As I mentioned at the start of the event, Green Olive depends on contributions from you, our wider community, to cover the cost of our events, sustain our work to combat the violence of occupation, and shift the needle of international opinion around the occupation. You can contribute at greenolivetours.com/contributions, which I've just put into the chat once more. Your support will sustain future advocacy initiatives and the work of our incredible tour guides also in Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron, and throughout the occupied West Bank, who many of you have met and every day are bringing international visitors to the occupied territories to see the reality with their own eyes, bear witness and hear testimony from Palestinians, and develop relationships with communities living under occupation, whose voices they can amplify in home communities around the world. Your contributions will also help Green Olive to create strategic advocacy resources, media trainings, informational films and primers, and other publications and materials whose aim is to expose the larger international community to the reality on the ground in Israel-Palestine, amplify the voices of human rights defenders, and provide people with the tools they need to be in meaningful solidarity and work towards a just society. Very lastly, Green Olive has just launched, I'm very excited to say, a new membership platform designed to empower people around the world to act concretely for justice. Green Olive membership provides an opportunity to join a global community of conscience and take part in activities advancing democracy and human rights. You can find out more at members.greenolivecollective.com, which I just also shared in the chat, where you can look through the new membership website and the various resources and benefits. And on a final note, as the 75th anniversary of the Nakba arrives this coming month in May, and the 56th anniversary of the occupation arrives in June, we at Green Olive are saying no more anniversaries. We want to end the occupation so we don't have to mark such dreadful dates in the future. And we invite you to join our community to receive updates and calls to action in the coming weeks, and together build a global network committing to ending the occupation and the ongoing displacement of Palestinians. If we all do our parts and come together like we have today to learn, to be vigilant, to develop a vision of justice that is expansive and excludes no one, then when we create a future in which such anniversaries no longer are on the calendar. So stay tuned. Thank you sincerely for joining. Thank you for the lively and meaningful conversation. And we hope everyone has good days. We're excited to see you in the future for upcoming events and to together build a vision of the future that we want. Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you.